All right, I've got an interesting this or that question for you today on Daily Hope. Now, we're in the book of Daniel, and we've learned about King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar is well documented in ancient history, including in the Bible, but also outside of the Bible. In fact, parts of his city Babylon still exist over in the country of Iraq. Nebuchadnezzar lived about 500 years before Christ came to earth, so 2,500 years ago. He had one of the first what seemed like global empires. Nebuchadnezzar was incredibly wealthy, incredibly powerful, this vast empire. He had unchecked power. So here's the either or the this or that. Who's greater? Nebuchadnezzar, who commands millions of people and controls millions of square miles of territory, owns billions of dollars worth of real estate and literally owned humans, okay? This guy who has all this wealth and power and armies, or this 16-year-old captive from Jerusalem named Daniel, which one is greater? Well, if you asked anyone in Babylon, they would say Nebuchadnezzar. If you asked God and the angels who are always looking on watching, they would say Daniel was greater. Now here's what's interesting about chapter 1, verse 21. Daniel remained in the royal service until the first year of the reign of King Cyrus. Well, wait, I thought the king was Nebuchadnezzar. You're correct. King Cyrus is actually 3 kings later. Let me compress some world history here. Again, this is all documented outside the Bible, but Daniel documents it here in his autobiography as well. Nebuchadnezzar would eventually die and pass Babylon on to his son named Belshazzar, very similar to Daniel's Babylonian name Belteshazzar. So then Daniel works for Nebuchadnezzar's son. That makes sense. Family business. Belshazzar grew up knowing Daniel. They have a similar name. Makes sense. But then the entire Babylonian empire is going to collapse. It's going to get overtaken by the Medo-Persians. A king named Darius is going to come in, set up Babylon as his capital, and take over the entire Babylonian empire for the Medo-Persian empire. Well, here's the thing. When he takes over, he starts to get rid of all of Babylonian castle staff, but he interviews Daniel. And he and his counselors are like, we like this Daniel guy. He's so smart. He's so reliable. He's so honest. He's so trustworthy. And essentially, King Darius says, keep Daniel around. Well, eventually, King Darius dies and passes on the Medo-Persian Empire to Cyrus. So when it says here that Daniel remained in the royal service from Nebuchadnezzar until the reign of King Cyrus. Now, Daniel will only serve King Cyrus for a couple years. At that point, Daniel's an old man, and he'll die an old life. So Daniel spans 4 kingdoms. Nebuchadnezzar had 1. Daniel has an eternally significant life, writes books of prophecy that would occupy and entertain minds like Isaac Newton, would help us interpret the book of Revelation, would give all these prophecies of the Messiah. Who lived the greater life, Nebuchadnezzar or this teenager captive? Well, because Daniel chose a life of serving others by serving God, Daniel descended through humility and then ascended to true greatness. Let's follow his example today. I'll see you tomorrow for more Daily Hope.